Welcome into another episode of Top Shelf here at the Score Studios. Levi Smith, joined as always by hockey experts Kyle Cushman, John Matisz, and I want to get out in front of this and say we are not trying to beat a dead horse. I think myself and Kyle, as Leafs fans here, would like to do anything but talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. But this is our first episode that we've had since they fizzled out for the 1,000th time. Feels like I saw something today. I was on Twitter that this is the coldest May we've had in Toronto since 1967.
Nothing notable happened that year.
Yeah, that's all. Nothing serious. No coincidence at all. But yeah, I guess we'll start from the top. Just quickly talk about, unfortunately, the Toronto Maple Leafs. But we've got a not a rebuild exactly, but we'll be building the roster. A retool, we'll call it.
A retool.
Coming up that I'm excited about to have a little bit of a look at and get our hopes up again for next season, as well as some conference finals talk. But again, let's start with the Leafs quickly, Kyle. We'll start with you, the Leafs fan here, one of the two Leafs fans. How did Sunday feel?
It sucked, but it was also kind of expected.
Yes.
Looking back as the fandom grows and you get into media, whatever. Your fandom changes, but this is the loss that kind of hurt the least in terms of you knew the script was coming, where they have the Game 5, they come back and give you hope in Game 6, and then you have a little bit of hope going into that second period in Game 7, and then it's just the worst period the Leafs have had all season long, where they just get absolutely slaughtered, and there's really no hope. Obviously, Domi gets the goal, and there's a little bit, and then that even fizzles out. So in terms of the fandom side of things, look, it's pretty brutal, but it's also a little bit of solace in the fact that the way that they lost, if you go to Game 7 against the defending Cup champions, there's a way you can lose in Game 7 where you feel good about your team. That is not what we saw in Game 7 from the Leafs. So at least it gives you at least a little bit of solace in the fact that it feels like there's going to be meaningful change, where we've kind of had that feeling a couple of times in the past, but it's reliant on either a GM being fired, which we saw with Dubas, and then there was no real change that could happen when Treliving came in because he didn't have enough time, or meaningful change at the top with Shanahan, or meaningful change on the roster. But now it feels like there's a chance of that because Shanahan's out of contract in a few weeks. Marner and Tavares are out of contract in a few weeks. So it's not just the Leafs that have the decisions to make, it's also the players. So it feels most likely that there's going to get changes here, and that's why we're going to talk about it in a few minutes here.
Yeah, exactly. I think with the Leafs in this franchise, it's such a step-by-step process. It's just so slowed down, and Game 7 against the defending Cup champs this in the second round, we'll take it. But it's they build this team up. They have a couple dud playoff runs. Okay, now same team, second round, Game 7, and now it's okay, now we're going to retool this team that just got here. It's just going to take forever, but we're always going to have hope. John, how did you feel a bit more unbiased here?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? Because if you looked at it objectively this season, they win the division, first time that's happened, non-COVID years in the Matthews era. They go the furthest technically that they ever have in the playoffs, winning 3 games in the first round.
Final 5 team, technically.
Technically a Final 5 team, but you can't break apart the baggage with this team.
No.
9 years of, obviously a ton of highs, but the lows are just so low. And I think you're allowed one mulligan a playoff in terms of, your performance, laying an egg, whatever you want to call it. Having, that one game where you go, okay, erase the tape and move on. Well, in the first round, Game 5 against Ottawa, that was that game. And then you get 2 in the second round. I think that's what fuels fans' angst and, really fuels their apathy at this point, assuming, there aren't major changes. It's how does this keep happening? What is up with this group? And how does it go from, feeling like, in Game 6 that they figured it out to Game 7 it looking just like Game 5 when they were not giving up, that's the wrong word because they were trying, but just once the Panthers went up, it was game over, right? There's no punch-back ability, and ironically, Florida's incredible at coming back in games, incredible at, they get scored on, well, next shift, guys, let's figure it out, right? Toronto just hasn't had that.
Yeah, tons of credit to the Panthers. They were the better
team.
Of
course.
They were definitely the better team, but I think it's not one of the worst losses that we've had here as Leafs fans, but
Are you sure?
I do think... I've felt worse. Like,
it's the fact that
yeah.
it's not like the Bruins and the Habs.
Yes.
Right.
That's basically what it
Yes,
comes down to.
Exactly. But
Yeah, like the Habs series is the one that is like, if you take away all the baggage and you just look at series by series, that was the worst one because on paper they were way better than the Habs.
Exactly.
Habs went to the Cup Final.
That's true.
Yeah, which was bizarre. But they were up 3-1 in that series too. So that's like the worst. But this one, because you just, like I said, you can't separate what's happened in the past.
There's a
from the
finality
moment.
to the loss.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. So, yeah. But there's our Leafs talk for now. We'll come back to it.
We'll
but
circle back. Don't
had
worry.
to get it out of the way. But yeah, let's move on to the teams that are still playing here in the conference finals. We are a game in each series. The Panthers are up 1, and the Stars are up 1 after a really fun game last night. So there was a point in the last night's game where I was like, all right, Panthers Oilers, like it's happening again. The Oilers were up 3-1, and then Dallas went on a crazy run there with 5 goals in the third. But I'm still going to ask you guys the same question because I do think the Edmonton's not dead by any means.
It's just one game.
It's one game. How inevitable do you guys think a Stanley Cup Finals rematch is? Because it felt like, I don't know, I think people thought Oilers were coming out of the West. Like there was a general consensus that might happen. Same thing with Florida. But at no point in this playoffs was I really like, oh, this is just a rerun again. Now it's starting to feel like that could be a real possibility. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word inevitable because I think it's basically a 50-50 series between the Oilers and Stars at this point. And I've liked the Stars. Basically, my feeling for the Stars was if they can stay alive until Miro Heiskanen comes back and gets his feet under him, then they're probably the Cup favorites. And we've seen that from Heiskanen where he's come back and he's looked fantastic. Yeah. Obviously gets his first goal of the playoffs there to really ignite that comeback early on in the third period of Game 1. And so you look at that series and it's basically call it 50-50 and you favor the Panthers over the Hurricanes just because it's been 13 straight games in the conference finals now that the Hurricanes have lost, which is a crazy streak.
That is a wild streak. Yeah,
So
you know it's a bad streak when the last time you beat a team in the conference finals, the Buffalo Sabres. That's a tough streak.
Team that hasn't made the playoffs in 14 years.
Exactly. So that's what we're talking about here for the Hurricanes. So they've got a lot of baggage to overcome. Speaking of baggage off the top, of course.
Yeah.
So you feel good about the Panthers going through, but then it's a question of is it going to be the Stars or is it going to be the Oilers? So I certainly wouldn't say inevitable at this point. It might be the favored outcome just because it's the most likely team out of the West. And if you got like a coin flip series, then you would favor a rematch. Mm-hmm. But I definitely don't think it's an inevitable outcome. And looking ahead a little bit, I do think it's actually going to be Stars coming through in the West.
You agree, John?
Yeah, I think we could possibly see a sweep in the East, although, Carolina probably gets a game or two, but that I feel pretty
16
confident.
straight, eh?
Yeah, that would be
calling it.
That would be something else.
That's
That's a whole
real.
If you win 16 games in a row, you win the cup. It's kind of funny that
Big
way.
math guy over here.
Yeah, I know. I'm big into math. So I think the Panthers get through. I don't think that's a hot take. I just think when you look at those two teams, and it was prevalent to me in the first game, I see somewhat similar styles. I just see Florida being a better version of Carolina in terms of like they're more physical. They have more high-end players. They have the better goalie. They sort of have, I guess, the pedigree or the cup-winning experience or cup final experience. Like I just see them checking off all the boxes that Carolina can't, even though Carolina's a good team. Like there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
They are capable of making the cup final, but Florida's just such a juggernaut at this point. And then if you go to the West, I'm kind of thinking like my biggest takeaway from Game 1 was that it feels like the series might come down to Jake Ottinger versus Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, because the amount of times he was one-on-one with those guys was, I mean, I didn't count, but it was at least a handful.
Right.
And as we know, these are one-shot scorers. These are arguably the two best players in the world. So, if Dallas is able to limit that, obviously that's massive. And even if there are a bunch of chances one-on-one between those two shooters and Ottinger, is he able to shut the door? And, like, he's capable, right? We've seen, especially a few years ago, everyone loves to reference that insane Game 7 against Calgary where he put up, 50-something saves.
Yeah.
He was a first-round pick for a reason and has had a really good season. So that's where my mind goes to immediately. And then if you look on the other side, Stuart Skinner, amazingly, he has 2 shutouts this playoffs in 6 games. The other 4 games, his save percentage, .833 or lower.
Yes.
Like just
Yes.
either no goals against me or like 3 or 4 minimum. It's been a roller coaster ride to say the least. And Dallas, like you said, got healthier with Heiskanen. That's massive. Duchesne got on the board after I think he had 17 shots in the first 2 rounds, 0 goals.
2 goals from Sagan, getting
Yeah,
that depth going.
Yeah.
Ben's on the 4th line. Dadonov's on the 4th line. Like, the depth is real in Dallas. Like, they were already deep before Rantanen. Then you add that that layer of superstardom, they're scary. So it's really a coin flip in my opinion. Like I think it goes 7 games and we'll see what happens. I think I would still probably bet on the Oilers at this point in time. If they go down 2, I mean that's gonna be difficult. But I don't think like kind of what Kyle said. I don't think it's inevitable that we get a rematch. But I think if I'm picking all the different outcomes, that I would bet pretty strongly on
going
that.
over 50% on that?
Sure. Let's
Okay,
go
okay.
57% chance.
There we go. But I think
Not 67%?
Not 6. I don't want to, jab you guys too hard here.
But I think we can all agree if there was no rematch, that's because Dallas will be there, not Carolina.
I think so.
Feels like it's trending that way.
We'll see. Yeah, when we talk next week, how foolish we seem. But,
Yeah, you never know. But speaking of which, like we were talking about, I think Heiskanen has been an awesome addition and stuff. And one thing I can't get over with the Panthers is that third line. I mean, talk about it unreal. All of those guys just showing up. So I wanted to ask you guys quickly and get your takes on this of who you think thus far has been the biggest playoff risers, because everyone knows the playoff chokers. Maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs, some guys on there. But the playoff risers, the guys who show up who maybe you're not expecting to show up, who would you pick that's left?
I mean, it's got to be E2 Listerainen, right?
Yeah.
He's tied with McDavid in 5-on-5 points at 12,
Wow.
which is wild.
Jeez.
When he's on the ice, so that third line essentially, they're 15-3 in the playoffs.
Insane.
15 goals for the Panthers, 3 for the opposition.
Crazy.
That's a crazy number for a third line, and Listerainen, for whatever reason, has the better numbers out of the 3 players. So he's the one that comes to mind. Like he's so he does all the little things. He's got some edge to him. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if I've ever seen a clip of him like turning the puck over or being like the reason why the Panthers allow a goal. Like just very solid all around. Another guy, since that one's really obvious, another guy I'll throw out there that's less obvious is Granlund in Dallas.
Yes.
And this is, I guess, more big picture where like the guy's got 4 60-point seasons. He's a really gifted passer. Like if you just like focus solely on that skill, he's probably, I don't know, top 20, 25 in the league, which is like
And had a snipe in game 1 too.
Exactly, and he had a hat trick earlier in the playoffs. Like he's really like he when he's on, he's essentially a star. Right now he's on the first line left wing for Dallas. So I wanted to shout him out. I think he has 12 points in 17 games or something. Nothing crazy, but he's had some major moments, and just someone who's flown under the radar his whole career with the Wild and Preds and Penguins and Sharks, and now obviously the Stars.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know about the riser label because we talk about him in such a glowing light, but Jacob Slavin still hasn't got enough love in these playoffs.
Yep.
Like the Hurricanes are up 13-5 in his minutes. At 5-on-5, going up against the top lines that we've seen in both of those top series, and even in Game 1 when the Hurricanes lose in pretty handedly in that game, he wins his minutes 1-0. And so going up against top competition, game in, game out, as kind of that rock on the Hurricanes' blue line, he's still putting up great numbers. Even though, as we talked about, we don't expect the Hurricanes to go through to the Cup Final at this point, he's been such a stud on that blue line and deserves love, even though we kind of talk about him in the regular season as this guy that doesn't get enough attention. Then we get to the playoffs, and we're still not giving him the attention. And so at the end of that Capital Series, Spencer Carberry talked about him as a guy that should be in the perennial Norris conversation and isn't for a handful of different reasons, but wanted to give him some love here before ultimately the Hurricanes likely bow out here in a few games. But if they do end up going through to the Cup Final, I think a big part is going to be Jacob Slavin's results at 5-on-5.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good shout, and I feel like he's like the Alexander Barkov of a few years ago, where it's like he's underrated like overall, but if you're paying attention, if you're watching games every night, you're like, this guy's a stud. Obviously, 4 Nations face-off. He had a coming out party there. And, Carolina, no offensive superstars, but I think you can safely say Slavin is like the exception if we're just speaking strictly on the defensive
superstar. For
and
sure.
like he can move the puck. He's a really good skater. It's not like he's like useless offensively.
No.
So that's what they have going for them. Like when I talked about before, where Florida's just kind of one-ups them in every every position, every part of the equation. Like I'd take Slavin over Gustav Forsling, in terms of number one defenseman. So that's probably the one difference there.
Yeah, one guy too, I want to give him his flowers because I think nobody ever expects this guy to be underrated or a riser or anything because of how much money he makes. But Seth Jones, I think, played to what he's worth.
Game
so
of his
far.
career in Game 7, right?
Yeah, that game was awesome, but
Phenomenal.
he's really like kind of the Seth Jones of like almost a decade ago, where he's really standing out to me. Like I was honestly kind of happy for him to see how well he was. Last thing quickly, let's get you guys quick conference finals series and Stanley Cup predictions. We'll do that quickly. So give me who wins and how many games on both sides, and then who you got for the Cup.
Alrighty, I'll go Stars in 6, Panthers in 5.
Okay.
Do you want to go next, and then we'll get to Cup picks?
Yeah, sure. Since I kind of already said, I'll say Panthers sweep, and then I'll say Oilers in 7.
Okay, and then your Cup winners.
You gonna make a pick here?
I'm gonna say actually, yeah, that's probably a good point. This is on the fly here. I think it's Stars in 7. I think it's Panthers in 5 too.
Great. So we all got the Panthers.
We've all got the Panthers. I'll kick it off. I think this is the Dallas Stars here. I think Dallas Stars get it done in the finals. I think that goes 7.
I'm going Dallas Stars in 6 to win the Cup.
Wow.
I'm going Panthers repeats.
Okay.
Again, it goes to Game 7.
Nice.
Again.
They blow a 3-0 lead as well.
I don't know if it needs to get that, replicated that way. But, yeah. I mean, I think I would speak for everyone that, like, it'd be great to see McDavid hoist the Cup. But
yeah,
the Panthers are just... They're such a well-oiled machine.
At some point, I've been standing. We think we all have standing by the take of like McDavid, Draisaitl need more help. Then when the team starts winning, it's like, oh no, they've got plenty of depth, and I just can't get over the fact of some of those guys on that team, and I don't think that they're going to show up when they need them to. So, yeah, I think
getting Ekholm back though. So
that's true. That could change things a lot. But yeah, Dallas
still have
Dallas.
Stuart Skinner. That's
true. It's always a give and take with Oilers.
No, it is. But yeah, there's our conference finals recap. Getting into the juicy stuff now.
Okay.
Building the Leafs for the 2025-2026 season. I am very excited about this. I was saying to the guys earlier, I haven't really seen too many people really lay out a full depth chart here, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to pull that up of how the team currently looks, and we're going to have John and Kyle here use their expertise to kind of pick some guys out, put some guys in, and really kind of get an idea of what this team will look like next year. I think there's a few guys, obviously, we're going to be locking in. Matisz is staying. Nylander's staying. We don't want to get too out of hand. Yeah, something crazy. And the D-core looks pretty firm. But we'll start with you here, Kyle, if you'd like, of where you think this is going to go first.
Yeah, so I think the main thing overall looking at the roster here is there's going to be quite a bit of turnover, but not on defense and not in goal. Because you look at the roster, all 6 defensemen that played in the playoffs are under contract through next season. So the only way that's changing is if there's a trade. I don't see McCabe going. I don't see Kristanov going. Carlo just got here. Probably don't see Benoit going. OEL just got here too in terms of a free agent signing. So the question mark is Morgan Riley. He has a full no movement clause. The odds of him moving are pretty unlikely. We can touch on that a bit more maybe if we want to. And then the goaltending is set as well, where Stolarz is under contract for another season, and Joseph Wool's new extension is just kicking in. So you look at those highlighted names of UFAs, they're all at forward. All the question marks in terms of scoring and depth and everything is at forward. So I think this conversation is very much going to stay at forward here, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the Marner question, right?
Yeah.
And I guess we should frame this as like, we're not talking trades here because like, what are we just going to cook up? Like,
we can touch on some trade ideas.
I suppose, but like in terms of like inserting names, it's so hard to insert a name when you don't even know who's available.
Right.
So we're going to use UFAs here, and obviously it's more best case scenario because there's 32 teams in the league. Major UFAs can go wherever they want, but we are going to play Leafs GM and try to fill these holes in the proper way. So Marner, we assume he is gone. Who replaces him? Let's put Brock Besser in there, leaving the Canucks, the UFA. So 140-goal season. I looked it up before we started shooting here. Since Brock Besser entered the league, he is 42nd in goals per game. So it's a big sample size. It's like from, I think he entered the league in 17-18. That's lower than a first-line player, technically. But I think if he's in that top 6 and is playing with really strong players like he would be, whether it's, Matthews or Nylander or hint if Tavares stays, I think that, he can be lifted up and score at least 30. There's not a ton of scorers on the market. Besser's right-handed, so he obviously fills that that spot for where Marner is. And I think it also coincides and complements what we want to do with that second line center spot, which is have Sam Bennett in there. So
Yes.
obviously a massive playoff performer, also a Leafs killer in some ways. His points per game from the regular season to the playoffs, I believe in the regular season it's 0.49 for his career. Playoffs 0.68 per game. So it doesn't seem crazy, but most players go down, right? Like it's easier to score in the regular season. There's something about Sam Bennett in the playoffs where he rises to the occasion. The Leafs famously do not rise to the occasion. He brings a certain swagger, a certain physical element. Obviously, as we saw with him in Stolarz, a sort of straddling of the line element as well. Some spunk, if you will. So I really like that. Obviously, again, best case scenario because he's going to have a ton of suitors, and he could possibly re-sign with Florida. Like, we don't know for sure, and he's going to cost a fair amount of money. So that's what we're doing with the top six. What do you think, Kyle?
My concern is the contracts, right? Because it's one thing to plug those players in. It's another thing to actually get them in free agency. And particularly looking at the term and the dollars that you would have to hand out to Bennett and Besser. Besser coming off of a down season. Bennett being a guy who is a fine second-line center in the regular season and kind of, as you mentioned, rises to the occasion or is a playoff performer. I worry about how those contracts will age because, honestly, we're probably looking at $8 million plus potentially for both of those players.
And Bennett's 29. Like, the guy is not young.
So it's a situation where those might be the best fits to come into the roster, but are you going to be better with those guys handing out that money? I think that's the big question mark. But in terms of just straight up replacing both of those two players on the depth chart, you're probably looking at the best overall center on the market. Like Matt Duchene's there. He's also not had a great playoff. Got his first goal there in game one. And you look at just kind of the age as well. Besser being a guy that has a high end, and you think about him and his success when Pettersson and Miller were on their game. You think about that with Matthews. You like that fit. But overall, I worry about the contracts that you're going to hand out to those players. And so we continue on with the rest of the roster because those are just kind of the one-to-one swaps that you're making. So I think the big question now is what happens with John Tavares. And Tavares has made it very clear that he wants to stay, but what is that number to stay? And I think this is a situation where the Leafs really got to put a squeeze on him, where you had to court him in free agency, and it took a big number to obviously get him, and he took actually less dollars than he would have gotten in a San Jose or extending over 8 years on Long Island, and all those different factors. But that's not the situation now where you have to court him to come back. Basically, Tavares, I think, is the flip side, where Tavares has to convince the Leafs that he makes sense for them to bring back. Because I think you look at Marner versus Tavares and the changes that you can make to this roster, I think it's a lot easier to walk away from John Tavares in his mid-30s after having some questionable 5-on-5 playoff runs than it is to walk away from Mitch Marner given his age and superstar caliber and all of that sort. So I think ultimately Tavares does return at a cheaper number than I think even we're expecting. I'm thinking like in the $5 million range, maybe even less.
Yeah.
He's made over $100 million in his career. Like if he's serious about like ending his career in Toronto and the family's close by,
you gotta
all that
put a
good
squeeze
stuff.
on
And he's made his intentions publicly known. Like I want to come back. So like it's possible he accepts a below market deal.
And that's what the Leafs have to do in this situation, where if you're going to make those Bennett Besser additions or whatever, you're going to have to get value out of the rest of the lineup. So I think there's two ways to go about it. You put a squeeze on Tavares and you get him at like $4.5-5 million, and you also have a rookie come into the lineup in Easton Cowan, where if you have Besser and Bennett come in at kind of some more expensive free agent numbers, you're going to have to make up the salary elsewhere. And if you're making some other additions, I think you make up that money by the difference in the Tavares contract, and you also bring in a rookie who's making under $900,000 on the cap in Easton Cowan, where I think you can easily have Easton Cowan start next season in the minors. I think he can probably hang in the bottom six of an NHL lineup because he is a player that will hang on to the puck a lot and has some junior tendencies like that, but he also plays a ton on the penalty kill in London and has a certain swagger and excitement level that I think would be a really good injection of youth to the Leafs, especially going into next season when the fan base might be a little questionable about the team. I think that would be a fun injection into the lineup. So those are the two moves that I'm going to make here in the top 9 to round things out, where I don't think Pacioretty is going to come back. I think he might retire or go somewhere else closer to home. And I think the two moves here that kind of allow you to build out a potentially better roster with bringing in Besser and Bennett is having Tavares at a lower number and bringing in a rookie contract in Easton Cowan there on the third line.
Okay. Yeah,
What I like about the Cowan addition is that if I look at the priorities of the Leafs in the offseason, it's replacing Marner, figuring out what to do with Tavares and second line center, like figuring out the top six from those three vantage points. And then the bottom six, you need some sort of offensive punch. That was very evident in the playoffs that they didn't have enough guys that, might score a goal. Like you're not looking for 20 goal scorers necessarily, but a bunch of 15 goal scorers.
Too many guys with goose egg in the goal column.
Exactly, yeah, that's a great way to put it. And, Bobby McMahon, not to harp on him too much, but, scores 20 goals in the regular season, nothing of substance in the playoffs. So, you assume he'll bounce back. Okay, Domi, inconsistent player, but he certainly puts up points. That's progress. And then Cowan, you hope – actually, it's a question for you, Kyle. What's a realistic expectation for him as a rookie? I'm not expecting Calder Trophy conversation, but
no.
If he plays in the NHL next year, will he in a way solve that problem for the Leafs where it's if he's in the bottom six, at least they'll have some spice there offensively?
Yeah, I don't think it solves the problem by any means because this is still a rookie coming into the lineup. I think you're probably looking at a 30 to 35 point season as something that's attainable because he's not going to be playing big minutes on a power play by any means. Probably not going to be playing a big role in the penalty kill as well that young in his career. So it's what can you do at 5-on-5 with some of those other options? I think a 30 to 35 point rookie season, a little bit below that half point per game mark, is a realistic kind of projection for him, which, when you consider his contract, is plus value at that point. That's what you're hoping for.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a guarantee that you're going to get that by any means. It's also not a guarantee that he could exceed that. But I think 30 points, that kind of 10 to 12 goal range is something that would be attainable given the production level that we've seen from him at the junior level, given what he would probably get in a third line role and maybe some spot minutes alongside some better players.
And then we got that fourth line there, Laurent, Lawton, Yarncroke.
Which had some good moments in the playoffs as this checking line, but ultimately were outplayed quite considerably in terms of chances and such. So I think there's a way to remix things where Steven Lorentz, I think every Leafs fan is in love with this guy, just as a real, true Leafs fan.
Yes.
When you're making Tim Brent references on the penalty kill during the season.
That is pretty incredible.
That is a guy who bleeds blue and white.
Oh, yeah.
So I've got him re-signing on some kind of cheap deal. I think he's exactly the kind of fourth line depth player that you love on the Leafs. And I've got Yarncroke coming out of lineup, probably in some kind of trade to clear up some cap as well. We also don't have David Kampf in the lineup here. He's probably out. Pontus Holmberg moves from second line to an extra forward, which is a whole different conversation. But I've got Brandon Tanev coming in here on the fourth line, where I think this is just a really fun move that I think is pretty realistic, where you look at Chris Tanev coming in last year on a longer contract. You have Brandon Tanev, who is finally going to be a free agent here. I think it would be really fun to see the Tanev brothers reunited here on their hometown team on the Leafs. And Brandon Tanev brings a lot of elements that the Leafs will need. If Marner's leaving, you're going to need an elite penalty killer to step in. Few forwards, if any, block more shots than Brandon Tanev.
Surprise, surprise.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so the Tanev brothers can eat a lot of pucks in Toronto. I think they would be absolute fan favorites, and I think it would make a lot of sense as a depth move for Toronto that brings you a bit of a different element than a Calle Yarncroke or somebody does. It might not give you the goal totals, but I think that looking at a penalty killer, a guy that becomes a fan favorite, all those elements that you're looking for in kind of a typical fourth line that we even see from a team like the Panthers, where you have Jonah Gadjevich and Thomas Nosek and AJ Greer and these kind of just rough and tumble kind of guys that can do a job in a few minutes. I think Brandon Tanev could be that kind of guy for the Leafs in a remodeled fourth line.
Yeah, great fourth line fit, and he's got some dog in him, right? I feel like the Leafs, compared to
dog is off the charts.
Exactly. Compared to the Hurricanes and the Panthers, the two Eastern Conference teams still standing, the Leafs just did not have nearly enough dog. But Brandon Tanev helps with that. I think Lawton showed that he has that annoying feature, that sort of always in your face, forechecking style. Really like that fourth line. Still a little worried about that third line in terms of none of them being sure things. But I guess if you look across the league, how many teams can say they love their third line?
Yeah. And so
it's just the Panthers.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so what are some other options here for the Leafs? Well, the one thing I think that would be a clear way to remodel this roster with some more depth, as we talked about, because the roster that I look at here with both Besser and Bennett coming in is that it's just kind of a lesser version of the roster that they've already had, where Mitch Marner is there, John Tavares is there as kind of the bigger money players on the first and second line, and then you're having to kind of pinch pennies in the bottom six. So what is a roster here for the Leafs that could improve that? Well, if you don't bring in Besser and you apply more of that money to a couple of different players in the bottom six. So what does a roster look like if you move Max Domi up to that first line right wing spot, which we saw a couple years ago in the playoffs have some success alongside Matthews, and then you can have a Bennett and Tavares still return, but then you have $8-9 million to spend on two players in the bottom six instead of having an Easton Cowan or whoever else there. So I think that's a solution that can make some sense in terms of bringing in a few different guys. I think about an Andrew Mangiapane if you're thinking about somebody else to bring in as a guy that had some success on Brad Treliving teams in the past. That has a down season. Maybe you could get on a cheaper deal as an Ontario guy. Like there's some guys that you can bring in instead of Easton Cowan there as well. But a couple of guys that I look at as some center options outside of Sam Bennett, because Sam Bennett is going to be a guy that is going to have a lot of attention in free agency, obviously. One guy, the issue with Toronto in terms of the trade market here is they just don't have a lot of pieces to trade. Like no first round picks. You have Ben Danford in the prospect pool. Do you really want to trade Easton Cowan when he's on the verge of the NHL? Right. Probably not. And so the question then becomes, what are some guys that are available? Seems like Marco Rossi's going to be a guy that's available, and I think he would be a great fit in terms of the age and youth that he would bring into this Leafs team. As a 60-point scorer on the Minnesota Wild, going to be 24 for next season, a restricted free agent, so you can use some of that money that's freeing up on extending him long-term as a center option. It's just like, what are you going to be able to trade to get him out of Minnesota? I don't see that as a realistic option. And then if Tavares does leave, who's somebody that could come in as like another top-end center and a right-handed shot out of the New York Islanders, who probably aren't going to be a trade option if Brendan Shanahan does end up there. J.G. Pajot, who has 1 year left at $5 million, one of the elite right-handed centers in the NHL in terms of face-offs. I think he'd be a great fit on like a third line or something like that. So those are a couple other options for the Leafs here. I think an ideal roster for Toronto would be moving Domi up into a more offensive role on the wing in the top six, and then looking at some different options, kind of depth of the lineup. So you talk about what a third line could look like in like a Florida Panthers type third line. I don't know how realistic it is because of what you have to do in a top six, but I think about like a Lawton, Tavares, Cowan third line.
That's interesting.
And what that could do with the youth and kind of grittiness of Lawton and then the veteran experience of Tavares down the middle. There's a lot of work that you'd have to do in the top six to make that work. And maybe it's something as simple as having Besser slide down to that that second line, having Domi step up to that first line, and maybe you can rejig some things there and make that work. You'd probably have to bring in another center at fourth line instead of Brandon Tanev. Like there's some things that could work there, but there's a way to make this roster without Mitch Marner's contract and bringing back Tavares at a much lesser number, where you can get to that point where you start to like that depth. But there's a lot of stuff to have to go that way.
Well, and like we're kind of underrating Tavares. If he does come in at a nice number, like he put up a point per game this season, and like if he's on the wing, he's even more sheltered there, right? Yeah. So he could be super effective. Let's just say $5 million. Let's say it happens that way. Like he could be one of the best bargains in the league, assuming he keeps up with his production, which like kind of blew me away. I mean, this was supposed to be the season that everyone looked at the $11 million and went, that is like unacceptable in terms of what he's producing.
And in the playoffs, it kind of was. But in the regular season, you got the totals.
Yeah.
The 5-on-5 stuff is the big thing for
the key is to shelter him, and I think that's possible moving forward if they move the deck chairs around a little bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll say it, as a Leafs guy, this has helped me cope, for sure. Seeing those names on that roster, I like it a lot. Do you think, I will say, let's just say it goes perfectly like this, do you think that they would keep Nylander on that second line with Tavares? Do you think they'd bump him up and take the Marner role?
If you don't have Mitch Marner there, I think it's going to be best for the roster to split those two guys. Yeah. So, like, the idea without Mitch Marner, in my mind, is that you have Matthews run a line, Nylander run a line, and you maybe have some lesser guys that they carry a little bit, and then that allows you to have some better guys in the bottom six. That's kind of my thinking.
Well, you mentioned Domi. He's obviously would be the playmaker when you got Matthews as a shooter, and Nyes as sort of the worker be there, right? So that would make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I love the moves. I think Sam Bennett, that's the one guy where it's like he grew up playing hockey in Toronto too.
Holland Landing? is where he's from. Is that what, like north of Toronto? I actually don't know.
I think
somewhere.
I just know he played on that team with McDavid, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. Yes. And Joshua Sang, I think, was on it too.
Yeah, awesome.
The Marlboros.
There's some good film of that team playing on YouTube.
Ridiculous team.
Check that out. But yeah, you know what? There's always hope in Leafs land. So as long as we can
It's the hope that kills
put
you, right?
something, yeah, we can put something together like this.
Yes, it does.
The post Mitch Marner era for one, like, it's because they've had so little success. I'm a little bit excited about it just to see a different look of the Leafs without a guy like that in it. I think it'll get to a point where I'm going to be like, oh, this was a good player that we had for a while there. Like, this sucks, but at the same time, something's got to change, and maybe if you got to take a little step back to take 2 steps forward, that's how it goes.
Well, if Mitch Marner extended, he probably finishes his career as the Leafs' all-time leading scorer.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a
Which
big
is
guy
a crazy
to lose.
thing to say, but like he's already fifth, I think. So
I
it's
think
like,
so. Yeah. So yeah, it's a big piece to lose. But again, I mean, I'd rather him see him.
Yeah,
walk
at this
than
point, I
Nylander.
think it's more likely that Marner wants to leave than it is the Leafs
Yes.
deciding.
They
to
offered
leave.
him a contract during the season, so
Yeah.
clearly there was
Yes,
interest.
I agree. At the same time, though, they brought him up with the Rantanen trade.
But I think that was in
shoot that
response to,
away.
okay, you don't want to sign with us? Well, we got to think of ourselves.
I think
here.
so. Yeah.
Yep.
We have this Rantanen thing on the table. If you're going to leave anyways, why don't you go to Carolina? Like, it kind of makes sense.
That trade would be
Even though
nice.
it seems like an insult, but
Yeah, but we'll finish off this Leafs-themed episode, which is awesome to be saying, considering they're not in the playoffs anymore. But I do have one fun one that I was saving until they lost, unfortunately.
Wow.
For our Top Shelf Trivia episode here. And there's a guy who the Leafs just played against who absolutely has their number in the playoffs.
Is 6'3" on...
Might be one of those third liners on that
My
Florida
mom's
Panthers
favorite
team.
player, Brad Marchand. I'm kidding. It is not.
She always texting you like, hey,
How about
There's a lot of
63?
curse words, let me tell you.
okay.
Yeah,
funny.
but it was a huge theme of that series. Obviously, that Brad Marchand's the Leafs killer. I think he's second all time, just behind Mr. Hockey in playoff
insane.
points against the Leafs, which is an absurd
crazy.
number. So obviously, we know how many points he has. But can you guys name me the 10 players after Brad Marchand with the most playoff points against the Toronto Maple Leafs since 2013? We'll let you
I was
start,
gonna
John,
say.
because we got the Leafs guy here. Kyle, where's your head go first here?
David Pastrnak.
Past is on the list. He is third, including Marchand. 21 games played. He's on the board.
All
I
right.
have a feeling there's going to be quite a few Bruins on this list for some reason. This is since 2013.
13, yeah.
Does that include the 2013
That
season?
does include the 2013 season.
Okay, well then the Leaf killer himself in that 2013 series, Patrice Bergeron.
Patrice Bergeron on the list. He's slides in at number 4. 1-1. Yeah, there's a recurring theme here. I think you guys might pick up on. Back
This
to
might
you.
just be naming Boston Bruins.
Nikita Kucherov.
Kucherov's on the list, tied at 5.
Wow.
Only 13 games played, but yeah, he cracks the list.
I'm gonna go to a more depth player here who felt like a Leafs killer, Jake DeBrusk.
Jake DeBrusk is tied with Kucherov. He's
That's crazy.
Wow.
nah, not too bad. He's
That throws
tied
a
there
wrench
for
into
5th.
my-
Oh boy.
Nicely done. 2-2.
Yeah, I'll go Steven Stamkos.
Steven Stamkos not on the list.
Wow.
No
You'd
stammer,
think
believe
the
it or not.
Ontario guy might
Yeah.
rack him up there. Okay, that's interesting. All right. You know, you missed one, so I'm gonna take a swing on a guy who might not be on the list, but scored some big goals against Toronto, especially in that Tampa series. Nick Paul.
Nick Paul, crazy pull. He's not here.
Oh!
He's not here. Let me do a
I
quick.
think we got to hammer the Bruins here.
That's crazy.
Oh, I wanted to get a crazy one in there.
Nick Paul would have been fun. Yeah, I'll give you guys a guess. Yeah,
Yeah.
focus on the
we're,
Bruins.
We're
I'd
feeling
say.
good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
David Krejci.
Krejci,
Ooh.
second on the list.
Nice.
Very nicely done. Yeah, he's got what is that?
Second on the list.
26 points in 21 games. I'll give you guys
Didn't realize
a
that.
frame of reference here too
Yeah.
for the points. Pasta's got 24, Bergeron 17, and then DeBrusk Kucherov tied for 14. So
Wow.
Interesting.
one big series could get a name on the rest of this list.
Well, speaking of the Bruins, bit risky because I'm going to go on the blue line. I'm going to go Charlie McAvoy.
Charlie McAvoy is not on the
Okay.
list.
Okay.
Right idea though.
Let's think of some power plays.
Say that.
Right idea. Okay, who else is on the Bruins blue line? Tempted to say Chara, but how many of these series was he actually around for? Who else would have put up points on that blue line? I'm gonna go with Chara.
Zdeno Chara
Wow.
on the list.
Thank you for the hint.
He's got
No problem,
13. Yeah, well,
anytime.
I'll say this as well. There's another one tied with Chara.
Really? Oh,
Exact same vein. I think is that 4-2 John right now?
I think so. Something like
so.
that.
Yes,
I don't
I
know.
think
There's
so.
like I mentioned, there's some trauma blocking going on here. Trying to think. So what's the lowest guy we have right now?
That would be Chara.
At what spot?
He's tied for 7th with 13 points.
Okay.
So yeah, the other guy tied for 7th, another Bruins blue
Interesting.
liner.
Okay. So who are some guys that could rack up some points? We have. Okay, let's go. Braden Point.
Braden Point is not on the list.
Oh,
Wow.
I was gonna
Braden
say, how did I
Point.
not
Figured with
think about
Nikita Kucherov.
Yeah, you
No
think just
Braden
by
Point.
osmosis.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna go with a Panther. So
I was trying to think of a Panther, but like
I feel like none of them have
short
torch.
series
Yeah,
the first time, and
Barkov, Reinhardt. I feel like Forsing actually wouldn't be a bad guess. And then who else am I thinking of? Oh, Verhaeghe. I'm gonna go with Verhaeghe.
Carter Verhaeghe, just off the list.
Ah.
Also not on the list. So I'll
Former Leaf, yeah.
I'll give you guys this. So there's 4 guys left. You're missing everything about the guy tied with Chara, and then we have of the bottom 3 guys here, a Lightning, a Panther, and a Hab Lightning.
Hab Lightning.
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let you have that one then. Let's see. So hit me with the teams again one more time.
Lightning. It was a guy on the Lightning, guy on the Panthers,
right.
Habs Lightning, and Bruins defenseman.
You know, I'll just do it. Matthew Tkachuk.
Matthew Tkachuk tied with Carter Verhaeghe. They're the first 2 names off the list. 9 points.
Corey Perry.
Corey Perry.
Yeah.
You got the double series in with both those teams. He slides in at 9. So yeah, we're just missing 3 guys here. 3 guys.
So there was like a Bruins defenseman.
I'll say this: they're all defensemen the last 3 here.
Interesting.
Bruins, Panthers, Lightning. Round us out.
Interesting. That Bruins guy. Man, who would that be? Like it's got to be somebody that's there for a few runs because they're not gonna rack up points like that.
Yep.
That's an interesting one, because like Hampus Lindholm is the only guy really come to mind, but I feel like he hasn't had enough of those series.
I mean, it doesn't seem like it to me.
No. I also have a crazy name that I'm gonna wait because there's like no way he might have retired in like 2015.
Thomas Kaberle or something.
No, even crazier than that. So I can't remember if he's been said, so this might be a terrible guess. Victor Hedman.
Victor Hedman's up and said, and he's tied for 10th
Okay.
on the list.
Okay.
Very nicely done. Yeah, 10 points for Victor Hedman. Nicely done.
I'll go with Aaron Ekblad.
Aaron Ekblad's who he's tied with. That's correct. So I believe that's
One left.
yeah, 1 left. I
It's
think
that Bruins
It's
guy.
that Bruins
it's the
guy.
Bruins
Let's
guy,
go back
yeah.
and forth on.
Okay.
The Bruins
Random
defenseman.
Bruins.
Honestly,
So,
I thought you would get him before Chara.
Oh,
Might be
okay. So
crazy.
it's definitely
Might-
not.
So it's not Chara,
Definitely not the guy I have.
No.
not Chara, not McAvoy. I'm
Might be
trying to think
crazy
who
to say.
has put up points.
So the crazy name.
Oh, I know who it is.
The crazy name I had was Dennis Seidenberg, and there's no way that is Dennis.
The
Seidenberg.
German wonder.
Like Johnny Boychuk or something.
I got a good one.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
I got a good
Go
one.
for it. Go for it.
It's your turn.
You've
isn't
already
it?
won. So.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Torrey Krug.
Torrey Krug.
Oh,
Nicely
wow,
done.
I
And he
totally
actually
forgot.
he did it in 1 less series. He only has 14 games here, but 13 points for
13 points in 14
for
games.
Torrey Krug. Yeah, I think he was running that power play. Right?
Yeah.
Had to have been. But yeah, there's the long list of Leaf killers. Felt fitting to bring that back. I'm sure there'll be plenty of guys left to add to that after or down the road. But yeah, Brad Marchand, man, I'll be honest, and this might be maybe Leafs fans won't agree with me here. Him playing on that Four Nations team and me really getting to root for him, I have respect for Brad Marchand. I like Brad Marchand.
Sure.
And,
Oh, I could respect a guy I don't like.
Yeah.
yeah, I just love the style of play, and like when you finally, we just got it for a sliver, I guess, 2 back in the 2016 World Cup that they did. He was playing for
Yep.
Canada, and when you get to root for that guy and cheer him on your team, just the appreciation I have for him, like, man, he does his job so well. So if the Leafs are serious about maybe building for next year, just go get him, go get Sam Bennett, maybe Ekblad, I think's a UFA
Yeah.
as well. Let's just keep building the
Yeah,
Panthers.
I'm
right?
sure an overpaid Panthers team is going to beat an
Yeah.
underpaid
Be
Panthers
perfect.
team. Yeah, that's going to go well. Yeah, no, Brad Marchand is an unbelievable player who also gave me some of my worst memories of my teenage years.
Yeah.
So,
As of late.
I can't, like, I know you guys have heard this stat before, but I can't believe that he's faced the Leafs 5 times, beat them all 5 times
Yeah.
in
In
Game
Game
7.
7,
Sorry,
yeah.
I meant in Game 7. and that it's a record. Like, you'd think there'd be someone else out there that's like from the original 6. I guess they didn't do Game 7
Yeah,
then.
that's the big.
But still, it just, when I saw that stat, it's like, it's Marchand and no one else in terms of like being a Leafs killer just based on that stat alone.
And
Two different teams, and he had an impact Game 7 this time around.
And him growing up as a Leafs fan too, like he really
interesting
truly,
revelation.
it's
post-game,
crazy, man. But yeah, I guess
This is the crash out that's currently happening.
yeah.
We went the entire show, and now it's just
unfolding.
I'm spiraling.
The
But,
tears are down your cheek.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it. The Leafs fans or non-Leafs fans out there, hopefully either way you enjoyed us really having to deal with these losses. It never gets easier. But as always, for John, for Kyle, for Levi, and everybody here at the studio, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week, and don't forget to subscribe.